October 1943. Somewhere off the coast of Philadelphia, a US Navy destroyer escort sits quietly in the harbour, and then, according to witnesses, it simply vanishes. Not sunk, not hidden. Gone. What happened next would become one of the most bizarre and controversial stories in American military history. To understand the Philadelphia experiment, you need to understand the world it was born in. It's 1943. The United States is fully committed to the most destructive conflict in human history. The Atlantic is a killing ground. German U-boats are hunting Allied supply ships at will, sinking hundreds of vessels and strangling the war effort. The US Navy is desperate. In this environment, the most brilliant scientific minds in the country are being recruited for classified military projects. Einstein, Tesla, von Neumann. The line between science and science fiction is blurring. The Navy doesn't just want better guns. They want to win the war in ways the enemy can't predict, can't detect, and can't explain. Enter the USS Eldridge, hull number DE-173, a destroyer escort commissioned in August of 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. On paper, a standard warship, but according to a story that would emerge years later, this ship was chosen for something else entirely. History. The Navy was already pushing the boundaries of technology. Radar, classified until 1945, was revolutionizing naval warfare. But there was something else. Degassing. Degassing is a real, documented process. Electrical cables are installed around the hull of a ship and a measured current runs through them, cancelling out the vessel's magnetic field. Why does that matter? Because German mines were magnetic. They could detect a steel ship passing overhead and detonate. Degassing made a ship essentially invisible to those mines. Invisible. That word would become central to everything. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. Certain Navy scientists weren't satisfied with making ships invisible to mines. They wanted to go further, much further. What if you could bend electromagnetic fields so powerfully that light itself would curve around the hull? What if a ship could become invisible, not just to a magnetic sensor, but to the human eye? The story, as it's been told, goes like this. In the fall of 1943, probably October, the USS Eldridge was docked at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The ship had been fitted with highly unusual equipment, large electromagnetic generators, a network of cables running through the hull, and technology that some claim was based on a unified field theory being developed by Albert Einstein himself. And then the generators were activated. Witnesses would later claim they saw the Eldridge surrounded by a greenish fog. The hull began to glow, and then the ship vanished. Completely, for several minutes. But the story doesn't end there. According to the legend, the Eldridge didn't just disappear from Philadelphia. It reappeared, almost instantaneously, in Norfolk, Virginia, 400 miles away, then reappeared back in Philadelphia. If true, the Navy hadn't just built an invisibility device. They had accidentally created a teleportation machine. The crew, allegedly, was not okay. Reports describe sailors found embedded in the metal of the ship, fused into the hull. Others had gone insane. Some reportedly vanished entirely, never to be found. So where does this story actually come from? In 1955, a man named Morris K. Jessup published a book called The Case for the UFO. Shortly after, he began receiving letters from a man signing his name as Carlos Allende, who claimed to have witnessed the experiment firsthand from a nearby merchant ship. Allende's letters were bizarre, handwritten, rambling, filled with cryptic annotations. He claimed Einstein himself was behind the experiment. He claimed the government buried everything. Then, and this is where it gets genuinely strange, the US Office of Naval Research received an annotated copy of Jessup's book. The annotations matched Allende's handwriting. ONR was intrigued enough to reprint 25 copies for internal review. The story spread. It evolved. By the 1970s and 1980s, it had grown into a full-blown conspiracy. Books, documentaries, a Hollywood film in 1984. The Philadelphia experiment had taken on a life of its own. The question is, what was the seed of truth, if any, that grew into this legend? Here's what we actually know. The Navy has been clear. Records of the USS Eldridge show the ship was in Bermuda for training during October of 1943, not in Philadelphia. The deck logs are available at the National Archives. There is no documented gap, no missing time, no classified experiment. Degaussing was absolutely real and was being performed on ships throughout the war. Some researchers believe the Philadelphia experiment legend grew directly from degaussing operations that civilians may have witnessed and misunderstood. As for Einstein, yes, he was consulting for the Navy's Bureau of Ordnance in 1943, but on explosives, not on unified field theory, not on invisibility. But here's the thing about great myths. They don't survive on lies alone. They survive because they ask real questions. In 1943, the US government was absolutely running secret projects that seemed impossible. The Manhattan Project, a nuclear bomb, was being built in the desert. Radar itself was classified. The OSS was running psychological operations that sound like spy fiction. Was the Philadelphia experiment real? Almost certainly not. At least not as described. Could the Navy have been running classified electromagnetic experiments that were later distorted and mythologized? That is a much harder question to dismiss. The USS Eldridge survived the war. In 1951, it was transferred to the Greek Navy and served for decades as the HS Leon. In 1999, it was scrapped. The sailors who served on it never reported witnessing anything unusual, and yet the story lives on. Because sometimes the most fascinating thing about a mystery isn't the answer. It's the question it forces us to ask about what our governments were willing to try. If you want to go deeper on secret World War II military experiments that actually were real, stay on the channel. The next video might surprise you even more. Subscribe and leave a comment. Do you think there's any truth to the Philadelphia experiment?